Welcome to Lifehouse Community Church. You're listening to a talk from one of our Sunday services. To find out more and connect with us, head to lifehousecommunitychurch.co.uk.
In May half term, I took a few days trip away and went to the north with some friends. We went to this area. There were two aims of the trip. Okay, number one was to see my granddad, who I haven't seen for a few years. He's Italian. His name is Paolo, and from what I can tell, or what he tells me and Holly, he operates as like the godfather of the Northeast. At least within the Italian community. It's never a dull time with him. He speaks to you in Italian and then translates into English. Yeah, it's quite something. And the second reason for the visit was to go to, Lindisfarne, the holy island, which has been the finish line for countless pilgrimages for over 1,000 years. And 1,300 years ago, it played a more significant role in Christianity than London, than York, and at times Canterbury. It has had a monastery for over a millennia and has been a training center for clergy, sending them out all across the world. It has also been a place where silence and solitude can be experienced, engaged in, and developed. And some of its previous leaders have performed incredible miracles, okay, which we'll get to later, especially one very, very quirky man. So yeah, let's open our Bibles. I've got the passages with us, but if you want to open up or turn on your Bible, you're more than welcome to. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting for 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. And he says again, "But when you go and pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father, who sees what you've done in secret, will reward you." And then Luke, "But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." As has already been mentioned, I am talking about solitude this morning. And those are just a few little passages sprinkled across the gospel about the practice of solitude. Jesus instructing people to do it and him also doing it, because there's no point telling somebody to do something you're not willing to do yourself. Just a good life lesson. I'm really, really excited to talk about this topic today. I feel like it has been something God's been highlighting to me the past months, if not years. And I really, really hope that this morning we can catch more of God's heart for the practice of solitude. And if you're like, what even is practice? Why is Ali saying practice? Or some people say discipline, and I realize I should explain, okay? Within the Christian walk, the life, the following Jesus, within the Bible, we see these different practices and disciplines, okay, that followers of Jesus engaged in to help them follow Jesus, okay? There are ones where it's just like we do all together, and some of them we've already done this morning. We worshiped, we prayed, okay? Like there are some that we do, we give as well. And then some of those disciplines and practices aren't about like doing something big and loud or public. They're about like something like taking yourself away from something or saying no to something and letting that transform you. And what this man here, he calls them disciplines of abstinence. Okay, so abstinence just means saying no to something. One that you might be aware of and has become quite popular just within the secular world is fasting. Okay, fasting, literally saying no to food. Okay, solitude, we'll get to a clearer definition in a bit, saying no to like community or people for a specific reason. Not for your whole life, but for a specific reason. And as we can see from the readings, Jesus did a bit of that and advised us to do so. But before we really get into the meat of everything, I want to put a disclaimer in today. I recognize I am the 28-year-old who is speaking on solitude, a discipline that involves as we chat about it, taking yourself away from your normal comfort, responsibilities, busyness, and so on. And I recognize I am the least busy I will ever be for the next 30 to 40 years of my life. Okay? So anything I say, please take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt, recognizing, like, yes, I don't have children. Yes, I'm not a parent. Yes, my job's not particularly busy right now. Please take it with a pinch of salt. That's not lost on me. But I still believe wholeheartedly there is something for Lifehouse Community Church to engage in deeper when it comes to solitude. Otherwise, I wouldn't be speaking this morning. And some of the deepest longings we have for God to move in our hearts, in our character, in us corporately, come from being transformed by solitude. So that's my little heads up. If at any point you're like, he doesn't know how busy I am hopefully aware, and if not, feel free to inform me later. So I'm just going to read those passages again. It's never a bad thing to do twice. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting for 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. But when you go and pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father, who is unseen. And your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. And finally, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. So, Jesus is clearly emphasizing the importance of solitude in the walk of being a Christian and following him, okay? And doing that by instruction and practice, as we've already talked about. After his baptism, so that's the first passage, he goes into the wilderness to be tempted and fast for 40 days. Long time. He tells us to pray alone rather than in front of others, so we don't try to impress people. In Mark 1:35, he got up early to go away, right at the start of his ministry, okay? A bunch of buzz was getting around after Jesus healed some people, okay? He could have stayed where, like, oh, I'm really, really wanted here. He gets up, he moves. He goes and prays, and then he's like, Peter's like, everyone's looking for you. He's like, nope, we're going to a new town now. And Luke summarizes for us that this practice is at least consistent in his life. He's like, it's just, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Thank you, Luke, for making my life very easy. It is recorded. This is the fun bit of the big screen. It's like, how much can you actually put on a PowerPoint slide? And at Lifehouse, a lot. It is recorded at least 9 times Jesus went to be alone with the Father. Okay. 2 questions arise for me from this, because of this. What is in solitude that is missing elsewhere? Why is he doing it? What is in solitude that's missing elsewhere? And what did he do? What did he do? 9 examples of him going away. Like, yes, he went to be with the Father and he prayed. But as we may know, and I know for myself, my own personal time with God, that can involve a lot of things. And it's not like he took his little Bible or his little Torah or a guitar with him. What did Jesus do? And what about other people in the Bible? It's not just Jesus. 7 to 8 times Moses went up to Mount Sinai to meet with the Lord, to receive the covenant, to worship, to pray, to intercede for others, and so on. Sometimes for 40 days and 40 nights. One time, this made me laugh. One time, Moses was summoned up the mountain because God wanted to tell him he wanted to make a covenant. Okay? Then Moses went back down the mountain to tell the people, God wants to make a covenant with you, to which their response was, that sounds really good, we want that. And then he went back up the mountain to tell God what the people had said. That's a whole lot of solitude. And a whole lot of mountain. Our walk yesterday was quite flat, to be honest. I did not fancy that experience. And let's not forget about Daniel as well, who got in trouble for not changing his prayers, his solitude, okay, his practices. And what is said about John the Baptist as well. You can go to Luke 1:80 if you want. It is said that, so this John the Baptist, and the child grew and became strong in the spirit, and he was in the wilderness until the day of his public appearance to Israel. Wilderness just means a place where people aren't. It's quite a summarizing passage about someone. John the Baptist lived in the wilderness even though his father was a priest. Zechariah was a priest. That's how that whole thing kind of kicks off at the start of Luke's gospel. John's clothes were made of camel's hair. He had a leather belt around his waist. His food was locusts and wild honey. And people went out to him from Jerusalem and all Judea and the whole region of the Jordan, confessing their sins, and they were baptized by him in the river Jordan. Sam Whitfield has spent a lot of time thinking about the wilderness and John the Baptist. He writes, John was not extreme. We may read that and think, man, that's an extreme man. John was not extreme. His way of life was a reasonable response to his knowledge of God. Revelation from God made him live that way. What is my response to my knowledge of God? There is something of revelation that comes in solitude, and John had received that revelation. And that's what people were after. They kept going to him. You can read the start of the gospel. People keep going to John and like, are you the Messiah? Are you Elijah? He had something. And I think it's because he was spending a lot of time with the Father in solitude. So, clearly, there are examples from the Bible of the importance of this practice and the impact it has. And there appears to be seasons of more intense practices and then also more consistent, sustainable times as well. But what is it? Let's give a good definition to you may notice there's not like a person saying who that's from. That's Ali Rice. So you can enjoy that. So what is solitude? I've defined it as intentional time alone for the purpose of meeting with God. It's not like, oh, you do it for 5 hours, or if you do it for 5 minutes, that's not something. No. Just time alone, purpose of meeting with God. That's solitude. John Mark Comer, who has written many resources on spiritual disciplines and such, they write, solitude is ultimately about building a quiet inner room with God we can return to at any time. It's learning to still our minds and be attentive to God. Henry Nouwen writes, solitude is the furnace for transformation. The furnace for transformation. In solitude, I get rid of my scaffolding. No friends to talk with, no phone, TV, music to entertain, no books to distract, just me. And he wrote that 30-something, 40-something years ago. In solitude, I get rid of my scaffolding. No friends to talk with, no phone, no TV, music to entertain, books to distract me, just me and hopefully the Lord. And what isn't solitude? It isn't a space for me to solve all my problems. It isn't introvert time, although introverts might like it a little bit more at the start. It's not a time for me to be angry with others. Oh, I'm really annoyed at Holly. I'm going to go have some solitude. It's like, that's not, no, the Lord's not looking at that pleasingly. It's not time for me to finish a puzzle, or as we already said, watch TV. It's about being completely present with God, yourself and Him. Nothing, nobody else. Nouwen continues, and it is me that I have to face. Rather than running from distraction, there's a lot of in the world, and what happens then is my thoughts run wild. When I'm not distracted by, I don't know where my phone is there, or my laptop, or whatever, or the World Cup for me, when everything else is gone, then the distraction comes in here. I think about the arguments I wish I made to friends or family, judgments of others, anxious thoughts about myself. Nouwen says your mind becomes like a monkey in a banana tree at the start of it. And then the task is to persevere long enough to stop being a monkey in a banana tree and to still yourself, quiet in the heart and the mind, and to meet with our God. Not always in a dramatic way or necessarily in a loud, booming voice, but rather relaxing into His presence and staying still in your mind and your body long enough and consistent enough to be utterly present, undivided in focus and attention to God. What did Jesus do for 40 days? I think we're getting there. The more I've been practicing this in small ways, I've realized what is actually in my mind and my heart. I've found my thoughts go to, this may not be the same for anybody else, but my thoughts go to, if I do this thing, I will get this reward. That is a unhelpful motivator in my life, okay? So when I still myself, when I get rid of all of my distractions, that's what goes to me, okay? I realize, there's probably some things for God to work in. And that's usually maybe a little bit of the fear of solitude. We may not want to know those things. When I'm not distracted, I'm starting to realize more and more who I actually am, and there's some things for God to transform. There's some things for me to face, or at least become aware of, about myself, about God. Once I get past those false self, we'll call them, He never intended for those things, those unhelpful thoughts, I've experienced peace. Peace that has transcended all my understanding, as the passage says. I've seen and experienced more of God recently because of this practice, and that has been wonderful. There is something for us to experience with God that can only be experienced in solitude. I'll say that. In the same way, there's something for us to experience with God that can only be experienced in worship, fasting, generosity, hospitality, celebration. There is transformation for us that can only take place in this practice, yourself alone with God. And probably a little challenge, if 90% of the time we experience God is in these 2 hours, there's something more for us to step into. Absolutely. I've got some books here. You can take a picture of the title. If you really want to borrow one, just take it at the end. These people are very wise on how to step into more of the presence of God. And if you're looking at the books and you're like, Ali, I hate reading, well, you're in luck, because we live in a digital age and I can send you talks, I can send you podcasts, anything that you'd like if you want to step more into this. And why do I believe that this is important? Because it has been a consistent theme throughout the history of Christianity. Okay? Solitude helps us to be more aware of the presence of God in everyday life and get to know Him in deeper ways. And it also helps us to be aware of ourselves, my unhelpfulness, my brokenness, sinfulness, but also the word that we've created, my lovedness. Because we are loved. I do wonder what the impact of a diet or consistent practice of solitude can have on us. I realize also many in the room will be having daily times with the Lord, and that's great, and we'll get to that. I also realize some of you may not be having daily times with the Lord, and that's fine too. We'll get to those things. This isn't condemnation, it's more of an invitation. Ultimately, the practice, and many of these practices, bring us to the question, is God alone enough? When you fast, or when I fast, and I've not had food for a few hours or a day, it really brings me to the question of, is God alone enough? I think it's the same with solitude. And our answer will be dictated by our relationship to God and our relationship to the world and all of its distractions. So, do you ever wonder what Jesus did for 40 days and 40 nights? Or what Moses did for 40 days and 40 nights? Or St. Anthony, who I haven't even gotten onto, but is a little bit of an extreme one, but he lived about 1700 years ago and he spent 20 years in solitude in the desert in Egypt. A wonderful man. And what about John the Baptist? We've talked about him. Why did he choose the wilderness? And I'm pretty confident that he could have become a priest. And it wasn't just men. Many women have led their life with this practice at the heart of it. Amma Syncletica, fun last name, from the 4th century, lived first as a hermit with her blind sister outside Alexandria in Egypt, and then with a community of women ascetics. Ascetics is basically just people that are choosing to live a simple life for God. They live together. And she had some quality sayings on this topic, which I'll read. Her name was, just in case you wanted to make a note of it, Amma Syncletica. If you spell it wrong, I'm sure it'll get close on Google. So she said, "There are many who live in the mountains and behave as if they were in the town. They are wasting their time. It is possible to be a solitary in one's mind whilst living in the crowd. And it is possible for those who are solitaries to live in the crowd of their own thoughts." Basically saying, you can practice solitude and not be transformed, or you can be isolated or secluded and not be transformed if you're constantly allowing your thoughts to be focused on others. And you can live in the crowd of everyday life whilst practicing solitude, if you're able to move your thoughts past others and focus unto the Lord. She continues, "In the beginning, there's a struggle. There's a lot of work for those who come near to God. But after, there is an indescribable joy." And that was said by a woman who lived 1,700 years ago in the wilderness. Not a pleasant time for her to live. "It is just like building a fire," she says. "At first, it is smoky, and your eyes water. But later, you get the desired result. Thus we must kindle the divine fire within ourselves with tears and effort." And what about people in the UK? Because everyone I've mentioned so far has been a few thousand miles away and a few hundred years. Historian, previously atheist and now Christian, Tom Holland said that, just checking my notes, he talks about this man, Saint Cuthbert. So Tom Holland, historian, he says Saint Cuthbert should actually be the patron saint of England. And we're going to get into why. Because a lot of the things that we desire, the miraculous, this guy experienced and God worked through him with. So this is Saint Cuthbert. He participated in the monastery in Melrose, which I believe is in Scotland, but back then was in Northumbria. Part of his story brought him to Lindisfarne, the place where I showed you earlier in Northumbria, where he consistently sought out solitude, trialing it out on a tiny island. It's really funny. You have Lindisfarne, okay, and then, so that's an island, and then literally, what was it, like 10 meters off the beach of Lindisfarne, there's this, not even island, it's called an islet, which I didn't even know was a word, and St. Cuthbert trialed solitude by going and living on this islet. But you can see him from the beach of the holy island. You could wave to him, you could yell to him. It's not that far, actually. But he trialed it on this little island and apparently had food brought to him and such. Anyway, he's a funny man. And then he moved to Farne Island, which is a little bit further away from the holy island. He was later asked by the king to become the bishop of Lindisfarne and aid the transition of the church there to the Roman Catholic practices over the Celtic ones. He was a miracle worker. And I am confident his miracle working was because of his practice of solitude, and what that cultivated in his relationship with the Lord. Okay? And if you're skeptical, well, we can get into some of the things that he did. And these are from, not a Christian website, worldhistory.org was where I got all of this. So, less bias. So whilst at Melrose, he exorcised a demon who was tormenting the wife of a royal reeve. He also performed a wide variety of miracles, and his fame for doing so continued to spread. With prayer, he healed the sick, warded off evil spirits, suppressed fires. He was known to pray for hours, even for days at time, shunning sleep and weeping openly in services. As I mentioned, after over a decade, he practiced solitude on Farne Island. And according to a historian at the time, Bede, previous attempts to settle the island had failed, as the place was haunted by demons. That didn't stop Cuthbert, did it? He went there, he built his little shack out of wood and stone and turf and such. And what Bede says is that it should have taken several men to complete this work. Cuthbert did it because he was aided by angels. Okay? And then there is Eliphalet, abbess of Whitby and sister of King Ecgfrith. We love the Ek or the Ed or what, 1400 years ago, who was then suffering from dangerous illness that had left her unable to walk. Cuthbert sent her a girdle, I think a bigger belt is what I understood that to be. And when she put it on, she found herself able to walk once more. Not long after, she was fully recovered. Then the many miracles he had performed in his life continued well after his death. This is where we get crazy. The water used to bathe his body was mixed with soil and then used to cure a boy who had been tormented by a demon. Another man was cured of an illness after praying at his tomb. Still another man, paralyzed from the waist down, regained the use of his legs after Cuthbert's shoes were put on his feet. A hermit on Farne Island was cured of horrific swelling and scabbing on her face after washing with a calf skin that had once belonged to the saint. 11 years after his death, Cuthbert's tomb was opened so that the brethren of Lindisfarne could move his body. They found the body had not decomposed 11 years later. And it looked like he was sleeping, and his clothes were all good. He exorcised demons, he restored the bodies of the lame and injured, and through prayer, or through the blessing of food and drink, Cuthbert cured all manner of illnesses. He also performed a number of miracles involving the sea, calming storms, and other bodies of water. He rescued the monks on the Tyne River with prayer before he'd even received his monastic tenure or started that practice. One witness claimed to have seen him wade into the sea at night, where he spent the dark hours of his night watching and singing praises to the sound of the waves. It is said that Cuthbert would get on his knees in the sea, and the sea would be up to here, and he would worship the Lord and be with him for hours. One storm stranded Cuthbert and his companions whilst they traveled on a boat. After praying, they found cooked dolphin meat to eat, and Cuthbert had already correctly predicted the storm would end in 3 days, after which they continued their journey to safety. Another storm stranded a group of visitors on the home of Farne Island, and he intervened, because of course he did. And without getting to the even weirder ones, he also spoke to animals and had some sort of miraculous relationship with animals that can only resemble Balaam and the donkey in Numbers. So, there's our wonderful saint who practiced solitude consistently. There are many things that we are desiring of the Lord, and some of them have been listed out. And I'm not saying 1 + 1 = 2. Practice solitude, you get the miracle. More what I'm saying is, practice solitude and we're transformed. The rest is up to God. Most of us are not called to pack our things and go live in a monastery or away from civilization for a period. So why am I saying all this? The reason I'm saying this is because the world we live in today, the time in history we're in, many distractions that dilute the call and cost of following Jesus and experiencing him. But what about Monday and the week ahead? What should we do? What would be helpful? My advice is try something you haven't tried before. And by that, I mean, if you've never spent time alone with God, this week, sit alone, read a psalm, and maybe underline the parts that stick out or cause questions. Maybe write a short prayer to God, or spend 30 seconds holding your hands out, posturing yourself to meet with him. Maybe, God, may you meet with me now. And there are people that have practiced this many times and have had months and months of not seeing anything. But then after pushing through, as has already been spoken about, something happens. I'm not saying something will happen tomorrow, maybe after a while. And if you have regular time with God in some sort of way for days, weeks, months, years, can I ask you to push yourself? Okay? Step outside your comfort zone and maybe shake things up a little bit. If you always read a chapter of the Bible, maybe try doing something else. Maybe try just, you know what, Lord, today I am not going to read, or now I'm not going to read. I just want to meet with you. That's my advice. None of this will also work without support. So, if you want to take a step, accountability is incredibly helpful. Having someone just to check in next week. How'd you find it? How was it? I was praying for you. I want to tell you a story quickly about my own life, and then I'm going to pray and finish. And that's a warning to Chris. So, as I've mentioned, I've been trying to do more of this practice, as it feels like an area of growth for me. 2 weeks ago, I listened to a talk on paradise and meeting God. I can link it in the newsletter tomorrow. Long story short, I thought I'd try silence and stillness again. I sat in my chair, my brown leather chair, which I love, and I always sit in and I always do my time with the Lord in. I opened my hands, I kept my back straight, and suddenly I felt a push against my chest and my legs. It was like I was locked in. All right. What's happening? I closed my eyes and I prayed in tongues for a little bit. Just asked God to show me whatever he desired. Say whatever he wanted to say. And it felt like I went away with the Lord. Like he was showing me things and taking me to a place, all whilst being in Banbury, sat on my brown leather chair. And after 30 minutes, which is like 5 times as long as I've ever had in silent stillness. After about 25, 30 minutes, I came back and felt incredible peace, hunger, and desire to meet with him more and more and more. And I've made time to do this since. And not every time has been like the first, but it has been good, transformative. And I feel like I'm experiencing my God in ways I've never before. I'm going to pray. Why don't you posture yourself before the Lord? Father, you are good. We know that. We've sung that. We've heard that this morning. You are good, Father. And there is something within us that wants to meet more with you, because meeting with you is like the best thing. We want to be transformed by you. We want to become more like you, Jesus. We want to walk by your Holy Spirit. We want to extend your kingdom in these places. So, Father, Heavenly God, I ask that your presence come now. You rest on us. And as we make time in the days, the weeks ahead, may you be close. May you sit with us as a friend. May we know your comfort, and your peace, and your love. May we be transformed by you, Lord. Because why would we want anything else? I pray this practice, among many others, helps us to love ourselves well, love you well, love others well, Lord. Amen.